Emily Carter had long stopped believing that life owed her kindness. At 23 years old, she had already buried her father, dropped out of college, and taken on the role of primary caretaker for a chronically ill mother and 11-year-old brother, Noah. Her days blurred together in a cycle of double shifts at the diner and long nights at home administering medications and triple-checking bills that never stopped arriving. Their small rented house in a quiet North Carolina suburb was a patchwork of duct tape repairs and fading photographs, remnants of a better time before everything fell apart. Since her father's unexpected death from a heart attack 3 years earlier, Emily had learned to survive by measuring hope in teaspoons. She didn't allow herself to dream anymore. Dreams were luxuries for people who didn't flinch every time the phone rang, fearing it would be another bill collector or bad news from the hospital. Her job at Ruby's Diner wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on and medicine in the cabinet. She never complained. There was no room for complaints when your mother couldn't get out of bed and your brother still needed help with homework after midnight. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Emily had just poured herself a lukewarm cup of coffee, no cream, sugar rationed, when the phone rang. She glanced at the screen, recognized the hospital number, and her heart stopped. She answered on the third ring, trying to steady her voice. "Miss Carter?" the nurse said gently. "It's about your mother." The next hour passed in fragments. Her mother had collapsed. Internal bleeding. Emergency surgery required. The cost? $180,000. The number echoed in Emily's ears like a cruel joke. She didn't even have $18 in her savings account. By noon, Emily was sitting in the hospital's administrative office, staring at the estimate in her trembling hands. The woman behind the desk offered a sympathetic smile, but sympathy didn't pay for surgeons or anesthesia. "There must be a mistake," Emily said. "She's on Medicaid." The woman shook her head. But her paperwork lapsed 2 months ago. "We've tried contacting you. Without valid insurance, we need confirmation payment to proceed with non-emergency procedures." "I'm sorry." Emily left the hospital in a daze. Rain had started to fall, soaking through her thin jacket as she walked back to the bus stop. Her phone buzzed with a reminder from the power company. The bill was due tomorrow. She silenced it, heart pounding, mind spinning. There was no one left to call, no extended family, no one willing to co-sign a loan. She couldn't even get approved for a credit card. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a list of overdue bills. Noah was asleep in the next room. The fridge was nearly empty. The future was a wall with no doors. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in months. Instead, she stared blankly at the table, wondering what kind of miracle she would need, and where on earth miracles came from anymore. When the knock came at 9 o'clock, she wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door cautiously, only to find a man in his 60s standing on her porch, wearing a tailored coat and holding an umbrella. He had sharp gray eyes and the kind of presence that made her straighten her spine involuntarily. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Alan Duval. May I come in?" The name tugged at her memory, but she couldn't place it. "I don't. I was your father's business partner. Long ago." He waited. "May I?" Emily hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered without removing his coat. His eyes scanned the modest living room before settling on her. "I heard about your situation," he said. "How?" "I still have contacts in the hospital network, and I still keep an eye on the people who once mattered to me." Emily folded her arms. "Why are you here?" "Because I can help you." He sat down at the table, without waiting for an invitation. "I will cover the cost of your mother's surgery. All of it. No interest, no repayment. Consider it a gift." She stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because it helps both of us. I'm offering a solution that benefits my family and saves yours." She took a cautious step back. "What are you talking about?" "My son, Nicholas, is in a complicated legal situation, one that requires him to be married quickly. I need a bride who's discreet, quiet, and trustworthy. You fit the profile. You marry him, and your mother's hospital bill is gone." Emily's breath caught. "Marry someone I've never met?" Alan nodded. The ceremony would be in 2 weeks. You'd be legally wed, and you would move into the estate. It's a contractual marriage, nothing more. Nicholas is not interested in romance. She stared at him, too shocked to speak. The man might as well have suggested she grow wings and fly. I understand this is sudden, he said, but I suggest you consider your options. The hospital needs a decision within 72 hours. If your mother doesn't get that surgery. Don't. Emily cut in, her voice shaking. Don't finish that sentence. Alan rose, straightened his coat, and placed a business card on the table. Think about it. Call me by tomorrow night. If you're interested. After that, the offer disappears. And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him like the final note of a symphony she didn't understand. Emily stared at the card. The name, the number, the offer, all of it real. Her hands trembled as she sat back down. Her entire world flipped upside down. $180,000. A stranger's son. A marriage without love. She closed her eyes and whispered the same question she'd asked herself every night for years. What choice do I have? Emily didn't sleep that night. The wind rattled the old windows, and the clock in the kitchen ticked louder than usual. Her thoughts chased each other in circles. She had spent the evening staring at Alan Duvall's card as though it were capable of answering her questions. A name, a number, an impossible proposition. Marry a stranger to save her mother's life. By morning, the hospital had called again, reminding her the surgeon needed confirmation before scheduling anything. The pressure had shape now. It pressed against her ribs, made it hard to breathe. At work, she burned 2 orders and poured scalding coffee on her own hand. Ruby, the owner, pulled her aside. You okay, hon? You're not usually like this. Emily nodded, her voice hoarse. Just tired. Maybe take tomorrow off. You've earned it. She nodded again, grateful and terrified. Time was a luxury she no longer had. That evening, Noah sat cross-legged on the couch doing homework, and Emily watched him quietly. His hair was getting too long again. He had outgrown his sneakers, but she hadn't said anything. They were still wearable, just barely. He glanced up and grinned. Want to help me with math? She walked over and sat beside him, pulling his workbook onto her lap. But her mind wasn't on the fractions. It was on Alan's cold, businesslike tone, on the word marriage, on her mother lying in a hospital bed, dependent on Emily to find an answer. She made the call just before midnight. Mr. Duvall, she said when he picked up. I'll do it. He didn't sound surprised. Good. We'll move quickly. A car will pick you up tomorrow morning. Pack light. I have a brother. He'll stay here. We've already arranged for a full-time caregiver and upgraded your home security. Your mother's surgery is scheduled for Thursday. Emily's throat tightened. You did all that already? I plan ahead. The line went dead. The next morning, a black town car pulled up outside the house at 7 o'clock. A woman in her 50s stepped out and introduced herself as Marlene. Her crisp suit and efficient tone made it clear she wasn't there to chat. We'll handle your affairs here. Just bring personal items. Everything else will be provided. Emily hugged Noah, promised she'd call every night, and fought to keep her face calm. She didn't tell him the truth. How could she? The ride took 3 hours, past downtown districts, into more rural, private areas. Eventually, the car turned down a long driveway flanked by tall hedges and wrought iron gates. The Duvall estate appeared like something out of film. All stone and glass, pristine gardens, fountains that never stopped flowing. It didn't belong to the same world as her modest North Carolina neighborhood. The contrast made her stomach twist. Marlene led her inside, without ceremony. The interior was just as grand. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, and hallways that seemed to stretch forever. Staff moved silently, dressed in muted black uniforms. No one met her eyes. This way, Marlene said, leading her up a staircase to the 2nd floor. You'll stay here until the wedding. You're not to leave the property without permission. Meals will be delivered. Do not enter the east wing. Emily stopped walking. Why not? Marlene looked at her with faint irritation. Mr. Duvall values his privacy. Respect it. The room was bigger than her entire house. Clean, luxurious, but cold. No books, no warmth. Just space. She unpacked her single duffel bag, jeans, sweaters, toothbrush, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was heavy. She had expected to feel something, fear, perhaps, or shame, but all she felt was numb. That evening, there was a knock at her door. A different woman entered, younger and cheerier, with a rack of dresses. "You're Emily? I'm Ava, wedding coordinator. We need to get you fitted." "I don't even know what he looks like." Ava blinked, then forced a smile. "That'll change soon enough. Let's try this one first." Over the next 2 days, Emily was fitted, briefed, signed documents she barely had time to read. A legal team arrived to go over the marriage contract. Everything was precise, non-romantic, controlled. Clause 4, no financial claims after annulment or divorce. Clause 7, public appearances will be arranged and must be attended. Clause 10, personal conduct must not damage the Duval reputation. Her signature shook. The first time she saw Nicholas was the evening before the wedding. She was brought to the sitting room where he stood by the window, back straight, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Nicholas," Marlene said, "this is Emily Carter." Only then did he look over his shoulder. He was older than her by at least 7 years, dressed in a tailored black suit, hair dark and neatly styled. His face was sharp, symmetrical, but cold. There was no warmth in his expression, no curiosity, just distant calculation. "Hello," she said quietly. He nodded. "We don't need to pretend. This is a business arrangement. Nothing more." Emily folded her arms, masking her discomfort. "You're okay marrying someone you don't know?" "I'm not marrying a person. I'm fulfilling a requirement. You'll be compensated." "I'm not doing this for compensation." He studied her for a moment. "Then you're doing it for family. That's a kind of currency, too." She said nothing. What could she say? He turned back to the window. "We'll speak again at the ceremony. Until then, stay out of the East Wing." The next morning arrived in a blur. A makeup team showed up at dawn. The dress was silk, tailored, and pristine. Ava fluttered around nervously, trying to make small talk, but Emily barely heard her. Her hands were cold. The ceremony was held in the estate's private garden. No guests, only lawyers and witnesses. Nicholas stood waiting, his expression unreadable. When she reached him, he didn't offer his hand. The officiant began. The vows were brief, devoid of emotion. No one cried. No one smiled. When the words, "You may now kiss the bride," came, Nicholas nodded once and turned away, offering her his arm instead. They walked back into the estate like strangers leaving a board meeting. Dinner was served in a private hall, just the two of them. Emily tried to eat, but her stomach refused. Nicholas sipped wine and glanced at his phone more than at her. Finally, he spoke. "We'll maintain separate quarters. I expect discretion, and I'm not interested in small talk." "I wasn't planning to flirt," she said flatly. He gave a short laugh, the first flicker of human emotion she'd seen. "Good." When the plates were cleared, he stood. "This arrangement will last 1 year. After that, we part ways. No entanglements. No press scandals. Just silence." And with that, he left. Emily sat alone in the vast dining room, her wedding ring cold on her finger. She was married now, to a man she didn't know, in a house full of rules. And her mother was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from a surgery that had only been possible because she signed her name to this deal. She walked back to her room in silence, the halls echoing her footsteps. This was her new life, and it had only just begun. The days that followed were colder than Emily had anticipated, not because of the weather, but because of the house itself. The Duval estate was beautiful in the way a painting might be, flawless, silent, and utterly devoid of warmth. The staff moved like shadows, efficient and impersonal. Meals appeared and disappeared from her private dining room, without a word. Doors closed softly behind her, before she even realized they had opened. It was as if the entire house was designed to erase her presence. Nicholas was nowhere to be seen. Emily only caught fleeting glimpses of him. A figure stepping into a black car early in the morning. A silhouette passing behind frosted glass in the east wing. The quiet click of a door locking from the inside. He made no effort to acknowledge her existence. They had not spoken since the evening of their wedding. She spent her days wandering the permitted areas of his state, trying to make sense of this strange new life. There was a private library with a breathtaking view of the hills, but even there, she felt watched. Cameras followed her movements, discreet but present. She'd find herself pausing mid-step, suddenly aware how easily she could be erased from this place. Her story buried under layers of legality and silence. One morning, 5 days after the wedding, she found herself near the main hallway when voices echoed from a formal dining room. The door was slightly ajar. She hesitated, then moved closer, drawn by the unmistakable tone of tension. "She's your wife now, Nicholas," said a woman, her voice sharp and polished, "whether you like it or not." "I didn't marry her to like her," came his answer, clipped and cold. "I married her to end this legal farce before it got worse." Emily's heart skipped. She's not stupid, you know. She'll start asking questions. She can ask whatever she wants. She won't get answers. The conversation ended with the sound of glass being set down, firm and deliberate. Emily stepped back before they noticed her and retreated toward the library. Her pulse thudded in her ears. It wasn't that she expected affection, but hearing herself reduced to a tool, a placeholder, bruised something deeper than she prepared for. That evening, Marlene appeared outside her door. "Mr. Duval expects your presence at dinner tonight," she said. Formal attire. Emily blinked. "Why?" Marlene didn't answer. The formal dining room was suffocating in its grandeur. Crystal chandeliers, a table long enough for 20, and only 2 place settings at the far end. Nicholas arrived minutes after her, impeccably dressed in a dark navy suit, tie precise, expression unreadable. He didn't speak until the soup was served. "You've adapted quickly," he said, not looking at her. Emily picked up her spoon, the porcelain trembling slightly in her fingers. "I didn't realize there was a choice." He finally looked up, eyes cool and distant. "Everyone has a choice. Some just prefer the illusion of none." The conversation didn't continue. The courses came and went in silence. When dessert was served, something delicate and French, Nicholas finally leaned back in his chair. "I'm leaving for a business trip tomorrow. I'll be gone for a week." Emily nodded slowly. "Will I be informed when you're back?" "If necessary." "Do I get a say in anything?" His gaze sharpened. "You got a hospital bed for your mother. That's your say." The words hit like a slap. She stood up, pushing her chair back. "I know what I agreed to, but I'm not a ghost. If you expect me to disappear quietly after a year, you could at least treat me like a person while I'm still here." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he reached for his wine glass, calm as ever. "You misunderstand. I treat you exactly as this arrangement deserves." She left before she could say something she would regret. As she stepped into the hallway, her hands were shaking. That night, sleep was impossible. Her mind spun with questions, fragments of overheard conversations, the weight of being trapped in a beautiful prison with a man who refused to see her. She wandered the halls like a ghost, eventually finding herself outside the one door she'd been told to avoid, the east wing. She didn't intend to open it, but the door was unlocked. Her fingers turned the handle before her mind caught up. Inside, the atmosphere changed. The decor was different, less sterile, more personal. Framed photographs lined the walls, some of Nicholas as a boy, others more recent. A woman's face appeared in several. Dark hair, confident smile, always beside him. Veronica? There were books with crease spines, an old record player, a chessboard still set for play. Emily stepped further in, curiosity overtaking caution. She reached a desk tucked into a corner of a sunlit room. On it, a file folder lay open, papers neatly arranged. She saw her name on the first page. Before she could read further, the sound of footsteps froze her in place. Nicholas stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You weren't invited here." Emily's face flushed. You disobeyed a direct instruction." "I was just—" "This isn't your house." You're here under contract. Remember that. His voice wasn't loud, but it was like ice, controlled, cutting. She backed away from the desk, guilt and anger twisting in her chest. I'm not your enemy, Nicholas, she said, her voice tight. But you're doing everything you can to make me feel like one. He stepped forward, just enough to close the space. You think this is about you? You're a line on a document, a tool to shield my company from a lawsuit that should never have happened. You're not supposed to be curious. You're supposed to stay quiet. Then maybe you should have married someone invisible. I tried that once, he said flatly. It didn't work. The comment hung in the air, heavier than anything he had said before. Emily turned and walked past him, back into the hall. Her hands trembled, her heart racing. She didn't know what kind of secrets lived behind those cold eyes. But something in his voice, just for a second, sounded like pain. Back in her room, she locked the door and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. This wasn't just a legal arrangement. There were things buried here, things that didn't add up. And now, for the first time since arriving, Emily didn't just want to survive this year. She wanted answers. The following morning, the east wing door was locked again. Emily didn't try to return. Nicholas's reaction had been clear, his boundary drawn like a blade. Yet, the glimpse she had stolen inside that forbidden space lingered in her mind like a question that wouldn't dissolve. She had seen her own name on documents in his private quarters. She didn't know what they contained, but one thing was becoming certain. Her presence in Nicholas Duval's life wasn't as inconsequential as he made it seem. The house responded to her curiosity with subtle punishments. That day, her meals were delayed. The usual quiet efficiency of the staff turned stiffer, colder. Ava no longer smiled when delivering updates. Even the cleaning lady stopped making eye contact. The message was clear. She had overstepped, but no one said it aloud. By afternoon, Emily tried to distract herself. She took her notebook and sat in the sunroom, attempting to sketch like she used to before her life collapsed under the weight of responsibility. But the lines came out wrong. The peace she tried to summon refused to appear. The Duval mansion didn't allow peace. It offered silence, yes, and beauty, but neither were the kind that made a person feel safe. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she wandered into the music room. She hadn't noticed it before. Perhaps it had been locked until now. A grand piano sat in the center, untouched, keys gleaming under a crystal light fixture. Emily ran her fingers over the wood, and without thinking, pressed one note. The sound echoed, soft and haunting. You play? A voice asked behind her. She turned sharply. It was Nicholas. He wasn't in a suit this time, just slacks and a gray button-down, sleeves rolled. He looked less like a statue, and more like someone who remembered how to breathe. A little, she said cautiously. Then play. She hesitated. You're giving me permission? He raised an eyebrow. You're in the room already. Might as well do something with the time. Emily sat, adjusted her posture, and began playing a soft, slow melody her mother had taught her as a child. It wasn't perfect, but it filled the space with something more human than anything that had passed between them so far. When she finished, Nicholas said nothing for a moment. My mother played, he said eventually. Before she died, this was her favorite room. Emily looked up. Is that why it was locked? He nodded once. Not many rooms in this house feel like they belong to anyone anymore. This one did. For a while. She didn't know what to say. The admission was quiet, but it felt significant. The first crack in the armor he wore so tightly. But just as quickly it vanished. He straightened, as if catching himself, and stepped back. You're not to go through my office again. If you do, I'll have your access restricted to the West Wing permanently. Noted, she said, her voice colder than she intended. I leave early tomorrow. Don't expect communication while I'm gone. Don't worry, Nicholas. I've stopped expecting things from you. He paused, then turned and left. After he was gone, she played again, slower this time, softer. The music filled the emptiness he always left behind. 2 days passed. No word from Nicholas. Marlene informed her that he was overseas, handling a merger. Emily's daily routine fell into mechanical rhythm. breakfast alone, monitored walks through the gardens, nights staring at the ceiling wondering how she had ended up in a place filled with chandeliers and locked doors. On the third day, something new happened. She was reading on the terrace when a man approached from the far end of the garden, older, thin, with a well-tailored coat and a presence that suggested he didn't need an introduction. "Emily Carter," he said with a smile. "I'm Walter Wren, head of legal affairs for Duval Enterprises." She stood, unsure whether to shake his hand. "Hello. I was hoping we might have a quick word, away from staff ears." "May I?" She nodded, and they walked toward a shaded bench beneath a weeping willow. "I won't waste your time," he said. "I've been instructed to deliver a notice of behavior monitoring. It's a formal warning." Her spine stiffened. "Because I opened a door?" "Because you access restricted files in the private wing. Mr. Duval was lenient. That won't be repeated." Emily's mouth went dry. "So I'm being, what? Watched?" "You always were. It's part of the agreement. You're a legal fixture in a sensitive corporate situation. Your presence, actions, and associations can all affect public perception. So I'm not a person. I'm a liability. You're a risk, yes, but so far a manageable one." She wanted to scream. Instead, she clenched her fist in her lap and forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm not here to cause problems. I didn't ask for this." Walter offered a tight smile. "Few people do. But now that you're here, consider this your final reminder. Obey the structure. Maintain the image. And when the time comes, walk away cleanly." He stood and left with the same quiet elegance he'd arrived with. That night, Emily found that her phone no longer had signal access. Wi-Fi was still active for certain approved websites, but her contact with the outside world had narrowed to near zero. Even her daily call with Noah was rerouted through a company liaison. The message was undeniable. They didn't trust her. She was not part of this family. Not truly. The next morning, she found a small envelope slipped under her door. No return address. Inside was a single note typed in block letters. 1 year is not guaranteed. He's already made plans for your exit. No signature. No explanation. Her pulse surged. She stared at the message, questions roaring in her mind. Who sent it? Why now? And what exactly had Nicholas meant when she overheard him on the phone days ago? She'll be gone a year. Was it just about the contract? Or was there something more final in those words? Emily placed a note in her drawer, hidden beneath her sketches. She had been trying to stay invisible, to survive the terms and conditions. But now the walls were watching her, and secrets whispered through cracks she wasn't meant to find. It was no longer about playing along. She needed to understand what she had truly been pulled into. And who, exactly, Nicholas Duval was planning to become by the time her year was up. Nicholas returned without announcement. Emily discovered he was back when she passed him in the hallway near the main staircase one morning. He was dressed for a meeting, already on the phone, his tone clipped and distant. He didn't pause or acknowledge her, just kept walking. She said nothing, but the encounter left a chill trailing behind him. That same day, her access to Wi-Fi resumed. Her daily calls with Noah returned to normal, though always monitored. There was no apology for the restriction, no mention of the note slipped under her door. In fact, nothing from that tense week seemed to exist at all in the minds of the household. It was as if the entire episode had been swept beneath a flawless rug, meant to be forgotten. But Emily hadn't forgotten. If anything, her suspicions were only growing. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the tall windows of the library, Emily found herself alone in the drawing room where Nicholas occasionally held informal meetings with guests. She hadn't intended to pry, but when her eyes landed on the stack of folders spread across the glass table, she felt a tug of temptation. She checked the hallway. Empty. Her fingers moved before reason could stop them. The documents were heavy with corporate jargon. Stock reports, board meeting minutes, legal strategy memos. All of it centered around Duval Enterprises, a company she still knew shockingly little about, despite being married into it. Most of the text flew over her head, but a recurring phrase caught her attention: Asset Protection Merger Clause 12B. She flipped to the back pages. A small paperclip held a correspondence between two attorneys. The email was short, but what it implied tightened a knot in her chest. If the board challenges Nicholas's eligibility again, Clause 12B will hold provided the legal marriage remains intact and unchallenged through Q4. Emily didn't know exactly what Q4 meant, but she knew what eligibility implied. And suddenly, the reason behind their rush wedding began to look less like a family favor and more like a business strategy. She heard footsteps. She slid the papers back into place and turned to the window just as Marlene entered with a tray. "Tea," the woman said curtly, setting the tray down without further comment. As soon as she left, Emily poured herself a cup she didn't want and sat down, trying to calm the unease brewing in her stomach. Nicholas hadn't just married her to save face. He had done it to secure something critical within his company. And if that were true, it meant her role in all of this had far more weight than anyone had admitted. Later that evening, she found herself wandering the estate grounds. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp and heavy. She followed the path through the gardens to a smaller structure at the back of the property. A guest house, maybe, or an office. It was unlocked. Inside, it was dusty and disused. Storage boxes lined the walls. Files, framed photos, and boxes labeled with dates spanning over a decade. She found a box labeled 2019 Legal Affairs. Inside were records from the year Nicholas had supposedly split from a former engagement. She remembered the woman's face from the photos in the East Wing. Veronica, a handwritten note, sat atop a stack of legal filings. Move everything related to Carter Holdings before Q3 board review. Alan insists it's off the books. Emily froze. Carter Holdings. Her father's company. Her mind reeled. She rifled deeper into the box. Among the files was a manila envelope bearing her father's name, Richard Carter. It contained a cease and desist letter, dated 4 months before her father's death, signed by none other than Alan Duvall. The letter accused Richard Carter of breach of contract, misuse of trade secrets, and financial mismanagement, all phrased in legal language sharp enough to draw blood. She sat down hard on a nearby bench, her hands trembling. Her father had never spoken of any conflict with the Duvalls. He had died suddenly, yes, but this letter suggested something else. Pressure, legal threats, possibly even sabotage. She took out her phone and snapped photos of every document she could before repacking the box. Back inside the mansion, she waited until midnight before locking her door and pulling out the envelope again. She read it 3 more times, searching for anything she had missed. There was no doubt now. Alan Duvall had been involved in her father's professional downfall, and Nicholas, he had to know something. Even if he wasn't responsible, he had to know. The next morning, she waited until she saw him in the library, seated at the long table with his laptop. She walked in without knocking. "I need to speak with you," she said. He didn't look up. "I'm working. I found documents about my father, about your father. You need to explain what this marriage was really about." That got his attention. Nicholas looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "What documents?" "I found a letter in the guest house, signed by Alan, targeting my father's company." He stared at her for a long time, then closed his laptop with a soft snap. "You shouldn't have been in there. And you shouldn't be pretending this marriage is about family obligation when it's obviously about saving your company." Silence. Finally, he stood. "You want the truth?" he said, voice low. "Fine. My father destroyed your father's company. He used every tool at his disposal to do it. Why? Because your father refused to sell his technology to us. Alan didn't take rejection well." Emily swallowed hard. "And you? What's your role in that?" "I was involved. I was in Europe handling another division. I only found out after it was over. And still you married me. I didn't know who you were until 2 days after Alan proposed the arrangement. By then, your mother's surgery was already scheduled. I offered you a way out. You took it." Her voice was hoarse. "So you married me out of guilt?" "No. I married you because I needed protection from a board that's been trying to dismantle everything I built. A legal marriage neutralizes one of their strongest arguments. So I'm a legal shield." "Yes." The honesty, brutal and unflinching, was somehow worse than denial. "I'm filing for annulment," she said, stepping back. "You can," he said calmly. "But if you do, the clause protecting your mother's post-op treatment disappears. It's tied to our agreement. You read the contract." Her breath hitched. He walked past her without another word. Emily stood in the middle of the library, 1,000 emotions colliding at once. Rage, betrayal, helplessness. She wasn't just a tool in their scheme. She was collateral in a long chain of quiet wars. But one thing had changed. Now she knew, and knowing was the first step to tearing down the walls they had built around her. It began with the scent of perfume. Something sharp, expensive, and unmistakably foreign to the cold, neutral air of the Duval estate. Emily noticed it first when she returned from her walk through the gardens that morning. It clung faintly to the hallway near the east wing, which had remained sealed since her confrontation with Nicholas. She paused, brows furrowed, and followed the scent to the drawing room, where fresh flowers had been placed in a crystal vase. That detail alone was strange. The estate never used fragrant flowers indoors. By the time she reached the main staircase, the staff were moving faster than usual, preparing guest suites. Ava passed by carrying a stack of silk pillowcases and offered Emily a brief, nervous glance before disappearing. Emily asked no questions. She didn't need to. Whoever had arrived didn't belong to the shadows. She got her answer that evening when she walked into the library and found a woman already sitting on the velvet chaise, legs crossed, a wine glass in hand, posture perfect. Her hair was a sleek wave of dark chestnut, her dress black and tailored like it had been sewn onto her skin. "Emily Carter," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's so strange meeting the woman who became Mrs. Duval, by contract, of course. Emily froze. "You are Veronica." The name hit her like a dropped stone in deep water. "Nicholas isn't home," Emily said. "Oh, darling," Veronica replied, sipping her wine. "I know. I'm not here for Nicholas. I'm here for you." Emily closed the door behind her. "Why?" Veronica stood, walking toward the bookshelves as if she owned the space. "Because your presence here complicates things. You think this is some noble exchange. You sacrifice yourself, save your mother, endure a cold marriage for the greater good. How romantic." Emily folded her arms. "I don't think any of this is romantic." "Good," Veronica said, turning to face her. "Then let's be honest. This marriage isn't real. It's a transaction, one that gives Nicholas protection from the board and keeps his father happy, for now. But when the year ends, he'll need a reason to dissolve it. And trust me, I plan to give him one." Emily said nothing. Veronica tilted her head. "Did you really think you'd last a full year? I'm not here to play games." "Neither am I." Her tone sharpened. "I was engaged to Nicholas, until Alan tore it apart. He claimed I was a liability to the family name. And Nicholas? He didn't fight. Not for me, not for us. But you? You're allowed to stay here like a legal ghost while they move assets and silence lawyers." Emily narrowed her eyes. "So, you came back to what? Win him over again?" "I came back because I know things. And because Alan still fears what I could expose if properly motivated." Emily took a breath. "You're blackmailing them." Veronica smiled. "No, Emily. I'm simply reminding them that I was never erased. Just pause." She walked slowly past Emily toward the door. "I'll be staying in the East Wing. I suggest you keep to yours. But I'll leave you with one thought. If Nicholas really valued you, even as a shield, he wouldn't have left you in the dark. That tells you everything." The door closed softly behind her. Emily stood there, pulse racing, mind racing faster. Nicholas had never mentioned Veronica, never warned her about the threat she posed. Not as a former lover, but as someone clearly tangled in the legal web that now bound them all. And yet, Veronica had returned not with affection, but with strategy. Later that night, Emily tried to confront Nicholas when he returned. He was in his office, sleeves rolled, reviewing documents under dim light. He barely looked up when she entered. "She's here," Emily said. "I know. You didn't think I should be told?" She's my father's mistake, not mine. Emily stepped closer. She said your father ended the engagement because she leaked confidential reports to a rival firm. Did she? He paused, pen hovering midair. I don't know, and I don't care anymore. Whatever she was then, she's worse now. She's here to stir chaos. That much is clear. She thrives on it. Emily hesitated. So, why let her stay? Because pushing her out would give her ammunition. Right now, she's a threat better watched than provoked. Emily bit her lip. And me? What am I supposed to do while she walks through your family's secrets like she never left? Nicholas met her eyes, his voice cooler than ever. Do what you were brought here to do. Smile when the board visits. Keep your name off headlines. Stay silent. Emily wanted to shout, to tear through his calm exterior, to force him to admit that this was more than business, that she mattered, but she knew better. Nicholas had built his life on control. He would never let her see the cracks willingly. 2 days passed. Veronica remained, ever present, always dressed like she was stepping onto a red carpet. Emily noticed how the staff seemed divided, some loyal to the old flame, others carefully avoiding the tension growing between the two women under the same roof. On the third day, Veronica made her move. Emily entered the sunroom that morning to find a tabloid on the coffee table. The front page bore a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakably her, leaving a clinic 2 weeks prior. The headline read, Nicholas Duval's new wife caught at fertility center. Baby bargain or business strategy? Emily's blood ran cold. She grabbed the paper and stormed into the East Wing, ignoring the glares from staff. Veronica was sipping coffee in her suite, robe cinched tight, smile already prepared. You leaked this? Leaked? Oh no, dear. It leaked itself. You married a Duval. People care. I wasn't even in that clinic for her. Emily stopped herself, realizing it didn't matter. Perception was all that counted now. Veronica stood. You're right. It doesn't matter. The damage is done. Investors get nervous. Rumors fly. Lawyers scramble. And Nicholas? He gets a fresh reason to question your value. Emily stepped forward. You're not going to win. This isn't about winning. It's about reminding everyone that I still matter, including him. Veronica walked past her and whispered at the door, and when this marriage fails, which it will, I'll be the only one still standing. Emily left without another word, but something had shifted. She had come here to survive, to keep her mother alive, to endure 12 months of indifference. Now it was war, and she was no longer interested in surviving. She wanted to know the full story. She wanted to fight back. And most of all, she wanted to expose everything the Duvals had buried. One secret at a time, the press fallout from the clinic photo escalated faster than anyone in the state expected. Within 2 days, social media was ablaze with speculation. Some questioned whether Emily was pregnant. Others called it a publicity stunt. But the worst accusations came from whisper networks within the business elite. Accusations that Emily was using the Duval name for leverage, that she had married for money, influence, and now, possibly, to secure a child in a permanent place in the empire. Nicholas did not speak to her once during that storm. Not a word, not a glance. He stayed locked in meetings or behind closed doors in his office. If he was handling the crisis, he was doing it without her involvement or knowledge. It was Ava who broke the silence. She cornered Emily in the corridor near the atrium one morning, her face unusually pale. You're scheduled to attend the Hamilton Foundation Gala with Mr. Duval this Saturday, she said in a low voice. You'll be introduced formally. There will be press coverage. You need to wear the blue gown we had fitted last month. Emily blinked. He's taking me? After everything? Ava hesitated. His father insisted. It's a chance to restore the image of unity. You're the wife. You need to act like one. The gown fit like ice, elegant, strategic, too perfect. Emily wore it Saturday evening like a uniform, her spine straight, her nerves buried deep. The gala was held at a downtown hotel ballroom, the kind of place Emily had only ever glimpsed in magazines. She arrived in a separate car, Nicholas was already inside when she entered, surrounded by lawyers, shareholders, and polished executives. When he spotted her, something shifted in his eyes, not admiration, but calculation. He walked over, offered his arm, and for the cameras, smiled. They posed together under chandeliers while questions were thrown from a controlled distance. Any plans for children? How's married life? Will she be joining the board? Emily kept her expression calm. Her answers were measured. We're taking things one step at a time, she said. Nicholas added, this marriage is a partnership. We make decisions together. It was a lie, but it sounded right. The photographers nodded. The moment passed. Inside the ballroom, the lights dimmed. Dinner was served. Speeches began. Emily sat beside Nicholas, trying not to show how her hands trembled under the tablecloth. But it was during the silent auction that disaster struck. A server stumbled while setting a glass at their table, knocking over a vase. Water spilled, and the glass shattered on the floor. The noise silenced the room. Several heads turned. The server bent to clean it, clearly mortified, but one of the guests at the table made a cruel joke. They can't even hire competent help anymore. What's next, mail-order wives? The table chuckled. Emily froze. The words hit with precision. Nicholas set down his fork, turned toward the man, and spoke with dangerous calm. If your mouth ever opens like that again in my presence, you'll never set foot in another Duval meeting for the rest of your career. The man went pale. Nicholas added, get up. The man stood awkwardly and walked away. The entire table went silent. Emily stared at Nicholas, stunned. He turned to her, leaned in slightly, and said quietly, you don't belong beneath anyone's boot. For the first time since their wedding, she saw something human behind his eyes. Not softness, but heat. Not affection, but defense. After the gala, they rode home in the same car. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was charged, filled with unspoken things. Emily finally broke it. Why did you defend me? He looked out the window. Because they were wrong. That's it. He hesitated, then turned to her. You've handled this circus with more grace than people born into it. They don't see it because they don't want to, but I do. The car slowed in the estate's long driveway. You saw at the beginning? She asked. No, he said. I only saw what I needed. And now? He didn't answer. The car stopped. He got out first, then held the door for her. Another first. Inside, he didn't walk away. Instead, he followed her to the corridor outside her room. There's a board dinner next month. Private. Only 6 members. You should come. She blinked. You want me there? They'll ask questions, and I want them to see I trust you. You do. I'm learning to. He walked away. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way his voice had sounded when he'd said her name. Not cold, not indifferent, just careful. The next day, the photo from the gala hit the press. Nicholas's public reprimand of the offensive guest made headlines. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Emily was suddenly cast as a woman of dignity, and Nicholas, the protective husband. Investors responded favorably. Social channels softened. But Veronica wasn't silent for long. She cornered Emily by the stables 2 days later. Do you think that was real? That moment, she asked. You think because he stood up for you in a room full of suits, it means he's warming to you? Emily didn't answer. Veronica's voice dropped. Let me tell you what Nicholas does when he's cornered. He adapts. He becomes what people need him to be. It's a performance. Don't mistake it for transformation. Emily stepped closer. And what are you? A mirror of his worst years. I'm the only one who knows what he looked like before the mask. And believe me, you haven't seen it yet. Emily didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time someone did. That night, as Nicholas passed her in the hallway, he paused. I meant what I said, he told her, about you not deserving to be stepped on. Emily looked up. Why did it take you this long to say anything like that? He held her gaze. Because I didn't think it would matter to you. It does. A long silence followed. Then, almost imperceptibly, he said, Good night, Emily. For the first time, It sounded like a name and not an obligation. And just like that, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not understanding, but the faint beginning of something neither of them could name yet. The call came just after midnight. Emily's phone lit up in the dark, the hospital name glowing on the screen. She didn't hesitate. Her breath caught the moment she answered, already bracing for the worst. "Miss Carter," the nurse said, "your mother's condition has changed. She's stable, but she was rushing earlier tonight. You may want to come." Emily was already on her feet, heart pounding. The sheets twisted around her ankles. What happened? There was a complication. Post-surgical. Internal inflammation. The team has managed it, but she's in the ICU. I'm on my way. She hung up and was halfway through dressing when the knock came at her door. Nicholas stood in the hallway, already in his shirt and slacks, car keys in hand. "I heard," he said. Emily blinked, breathless. "How?" "I have notifications set on the family's medical proxies. I'm taking you." "You don't have to." "I know. Let's go." They didn't speak during the drive. The highway was nearly empty, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. Nicholas's hands were steady on the wheel, his jaw tight. Emily stared out the window, her mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. At the hospital, Nicholas walked beside her without a word of protest, passing security and reception as if he had been there before. They rode the elevator in silence, and when the doors opened, Emily nearly broke. Seeing her mother pale and asleep under the hum of machines fractured something in her chest she had spent months holding together. She stepped to the bedside and touched her mother's hand gently. It was warm, but weaker than before. Nicholas remained near the door, watching everything without interfering. When the nurse came in, she nodded at him as if she already knew who he was. He had been here, many times perhaps, but never made it a spectacle. After an hour, Emily stepped into the hallway to breathe. Nicholas followed. "I don't know what I'd do if I lost her," she said softly. "She's a fighter. Like you." Emily glanced at him. "You sound like you mean that." "I do." She leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "I used to dream of getting out of all this. Before my father died, before the bills piled up, I wanted to study art, maybe work in museums. Something quiet. Something mine." Nicholas studied her. What stopped you wasn't just tragedy. It was sacrifice. She met his eyes. "You sound like someone who's done it too." He didn't answer at first. Then quietly, more than once. The nurse appeared a moment later. "She's resting now. You can visit again in the morning." They left the hospital as dawn began breaking. In the car, Nicholas asked if she wanted to stop anywhere. Emily shook her head. All she wanted was a shower and silence. Back at the estate, Nicholas waited as she climbed out of the car. "You don't have to thank me," he said before she could say anything. "But I hope you understand now that this marriage isn't just numbers on a contract." Emily paused. "Then what is it?" "A chance. At something neither of us thought we'd ever have." She didn't respond. Not yet, but something in her shifted. That afternoon, while she rested, the world outside caught fire. Veronica struck again. This time, it wasn't a headline, it was a photo leak. A single image circulated across business gossip networks and social media. It showed Emily and Nicholas standing beside her mother's hospital bed. The angle made it intimate, protective. Nicholas's hand hovered close to hers. The caption? Gold Digger's last play, using tragedy to secure power. Emily stared at the screen when Ava brought her the tablet, her stomach turning. "Where did this come from?" she asked. Ava's voice was tight. "It came from inside the hospital. Someone sold it. But the timing, it's too perfect." It coincided with Veronica's meeting with Alan Duvall last night. Nicholas found her in the garden minutes later, still holding the tablet. He didn't look at the photo. He just said, "It's starting again. You think she sold it?" "Veronica has her hands in everything, and my father won't stop her. Not until she becomes useful again." Emily lowered the screen. "Why won't he protect his own family?" Nicholas's voice turned bitter. "Because family only matters to Alan when it adds value." Emily exhaled. "And what happens now?" Now! Nicholas's jaw clenched. Now, we go quiet. We act calm. We let the storm pass, and we don't let them see a crack. That evening, Nicholas avoided dinner, retreating to his office. Emily sat alone in the formal dining room, her appetite gone. She pushed the plate away and went upstairs, needing air, space, anything but silence. She walked the halls until she reached the old music room. The piano sat waiting, untouched for weeks. She sat down, fingers brushing the keys, and began to play the same melody she'd once played for herself, before everything changed. After a few minutes, she heard the door open. Nicholas stepped in, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "You're playing again," he said. "I needed to remember something that wasn't manipulated or managed." He walked closer. "You were right, about her, about everything." Emily kept playing, the notes soft. "Then say it." She did it. She leaked the photo. And now the board is asking questions I can't answer without exposing the entire arrangement. Emily stopped. "You mean the fake marriage?" "No," he said quietly. "I mean how real it's become, and how much it would cost us both to admit that." Emily looked at him. "Then stop hiding behind the contract. Stop pretending you don't care." Nicholas stepped closer, his voice lower now. "What if I care too much?" The music stopped. The silence filled the space between them like a hell breath. Then Nicholas reached out and touched her hand lightly. Not for show, not for strategy. For her. The moment passed quietly, but it changed something permanent. Emily stood, not pulling away. Neither of them said another word. But when she left the room, she knew they had crossed a threshold that neither press nor contract could undo. The next morning, Emily sat by the window of her room, the letter in her hands trembling slightly despite the warmth of the sun outside. She had found it by accident while searching for an old sketchbook in a box of keepsakes sent from her childhood home, one that had been stored and forgotten at the back of her closet. Since moving into the Duval estate, the envelope was thin, brittle at the edges. Her name was written in her father's hand, unmistakable even after all these years. No date, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, the ink slightly faded. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't able to protect you from the world I tried to keep you out of. There are things you don't know. Things I couldn't explain while I was alive, not without putting you in more danger. But you need to remember one thing above all. Never trust the Duvals. I made mistakes. I thought a partnership would save the company. I was wrong. Alan Duval doesn't save people. He uses them. I didn't want you involved in this. I tried everything to keep your name clean. If they ever come to you offering help, remember it's never free. Never. Dad." She read the letter 3 times before the weight of it finally settled in her chest. The truth had been there all along. Her father had tried to warn her, even from the grave, and Emily had walked straight into the hands of the very man he'd feared, under the illusion of salvation. She folded the letter, tucked it into her jacket, and left her room. The house was unusually quiet that day. Veronica had gone on a weekend trip, under the guise of visiting friends, but more likely plotting her next strategic leak. Nicholas was in a meeting with board members, locked behind closed doors. Emily used the quiet to her advantage. She headed straight to the East Wing again. This time not to sneak into Nicholas's private room, but to search the adjacent study once used by Alan before he relocated to the company's headquarters in New York. The door was unlocked. The office had been undisturbed, dust resting softly across the furniture. She rifled through drawers, shelves, and filing cabinets, guided by instinct rather than certainty. It was in the bottom drawer of a locked cabinet that she found a black folder buried beneath stacks of unrelated financial statements. Inside, contracts, memos, emails printed and bound. One phrase repeated across several pages: Carter acquisition proposal. It wasn't just about dissolving Carter Holdings. Alan had intended to absorb it, twist its resources into the infrastructure of Duval Enterprises, and erase Richard Carter's name from every patent and project they had collaborated on. Emily's stomach turned as she read further. In one email, Alan had written to his legal team, "If Richard refuses a final offer, we shift strategy. Discredit. Isolate. trigger default clauses. He'll fold before it goes public. The cold calculation of it made her skin crawl. Worse still, a side note had been added at the bottom of one document. In Nicholas's handwriting, "This is unnecessary. We're pushing too hard." It was dated just 6 weeks before her father's heart attack. She sat back in the chair, the folder resting on her lap. Nicholas had known. Maybe not everything, but he had seen what was happening and had tried to stop it. The implication hit her like a wave. Nicholas wasn't entirely complicit, but he had been present, aware, and silent. Later that evening, she waited for him in the library. When he finally walked in, still dressed in a dark suit, she stood without preamble. "I found a letter," she said, "from my father." Nicholas didn't move. "What did it say?" "That I should never trust your family. That Alan used him. That the deal that ruined us was never meant to help. It was a setup." He exhaled slowly. "I believe him." Emily's hands tightened. "You knew." He met her gaze. "I suspected. I pushed back. I told my father it was going too far, that it would break him, but he didn't listen. And you still let me marry into this? I didn't know who you were when Alan first made the offer. I only knew your name after the contracts were drafted. You could have called it off." "I should have," he said. "But by the time I knew, the damage had already been done. You needed help. I had leverage. I used it, and I hate myself for it." Emily shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her. "You think remorse makes this better?" "No," Nicholas said, voice low. "But maybe truth does." He crossed the room and opened the small safe hidden in the bookshelf. From inside, he pulled a separate envelope, sealed, legal in appearance, marked confidential, for Emily Carter only. "I found this 3 weeks ago," he said. "My father's backup file on the Carter case. He kept it in a private archive. He never thought anyone would look through it." Emily took the envelope, her fingers numb. Inside were documents confirming her father's patents had been quietly re-registered under a shell corporation, one later absorbed by Duval Enterprises. Her father's inventions had become Duval property without a single courtroom or headline. There was no need to discredit him. He had been stripped and erased in silence. Emily lowered the papers. "You've known this for weeks?" "I wanted to tell you, but I needed to be sure. I needed proof I could put in your hands." "That's it." She didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "Then tell me what happens next. What are you going to do with this?" Nicholas's voice was steady, but something behind it cracked. "I'm going to dismantle the part of this company built on lies. Starting with my father." "You'd turn against him?" "I already did. I just didn't realize it until now." Emily nodded once. "Then you'll need to tell the truth. Not just to me, but to the world." He didn't flinch. "I will." That night, as she sat on the edge of her bed, the envelope resting beside her like a stone, Emily realized this wasn't just about debt or betrayal anymore. This was legacy, and she would no longer carry the shame of it. The following morning, Emily awoke with a resolve that felt different from anything she had experienced since arriving at the Duval estate. It wasn't survival instinct, nor the quiet desperation she'd grown accustomed to. It was clarity. The truth was no longer hidden. She had it in writing, in her hands, and Nicholas had acknowledged it without deflection or excuse. But truth, as she now understood, was only the beginning. At breakfast, the dining room was unusually quiet. Veronica hadn't returned from her trip, and Alan was still in New York. Nicholas entered dressed not for work, but in a simple black sweater and jeans, an unfamiliar softness to his usually rigid presentation. He sat across from her, without a word. Emily placed the documents he had given her on the table. "I've reviewed them all. They're real." He nodded. "Yes. I want you to release them. Publicly." His gaze didn't waver. "That's what I'm preparing for." "Good. Because if you don't, I will." "You should." The agreement was unspoken, but immediate. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. They both knew what this meant. A confession like this wouldn't just tarnish the Duval name. It would fracture it permanently. Nicholas wasn't just turning against his father. He was burning a legacy built over decades. Later that day, Emily stood in front of the mirror in her room, the same mirror she had faced before her wedding. Then, she had been terrified. Now, she saw something sharp in her reflection, not hardened, but no longer afraid. She left the room with the folder in her hand and went straight to Alan Duvall's private study, where she knew Nicholas had already begun compiling the materials needed to confront the board. Inside, Nicholas stood at the desk, scanning files, a laptop open beside him. He looked up when she entered. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Are you?" "I don't think I've ever been." She stepped closer. "We'll do it together. But after this, I'm leaving the estate. This marriage ends." Nicholas didn't flinch, but his expression shifted. An acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance that something irreversible had taken root. "I understand," he said. "You said I was part of something you built, but I was never asked. I was used. That ends today." "I know." He gathered the documents. "I've called a meeting for this evening. Only the 6 executive board members will be there. No press. Not yet." Emily crossed her arms. "You're going to tell them your father stole Carter Holdings?" "Yes, and that I'm voluntarily ceding any asset connected to it. The patents, the profits, the technology, everything." She didn't speak. The words hung in the air like the final breath before a plunge. That evening, the board gathered in the estate's smaller conference room. It was the first time Emily had seen all of them together. Men and women who had spent years curating power, all now seated at a long, polished table, their eyes focused on Nicholas. Nicholas stood at the head, Emily at his side. A stack of folders waited in front of each chair. He began without pleasantries. "My name is on the paperwork," he said, "but not my conscience. My father orchestrated the dismantling of a partner company, Carter Holdings, through legal manipulation, intellectual property theft, and targeted financial sabotage. I've discovered proof of this, which you will find in front of you." No one moved. "I married Emily Carter not as a business alliance, but to correct a legacy of wrongdoing I was born into. That was never clear to me until now." One of the board members leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" Nicholas took a breath. "I'm proposing full release of all Carter Holdings patents, retroactive acknowledgement of ownership to Richard Carter's estate, public restitution, and I will step back from any executive control if required." The room broke into low murmurs. "You'd risk everything?" another asked. "For what?" "Guilt." "For integrity," Nicholas answered. "For clarity. And because if we don't fix this now, someone else will later, and far more brutally." Emily spoke then, her voice steady. "My father died thinking he had failed. He didn't. He was destroyed by people who feared what he created. That truth doesn't belong in shadows anymore." The board didn't respond immediately. Some flipped through files. Others simply stared at Nicholas as if seeing him for the first time. After the meeting, they walked out into the hallway, neither speaking. Nicholas's shoulders were tight, but he didn't break. Not even when Walter, the Duvall legal advisor, approached quietly. "They'll deliberate," Walter said, "but the documents are clear. There's no path back for Alan after this." Nicholas only nodded. Later that night, Emily began packing. She didn't wait for an argument, didn't anticipate a change of heart. She had said what needed to be said, and now she would leave with her name restored, not by scandal, but by truth. Nicholas knocked once before entering her room. "You're really going?" She zipped the last of her bags. "Yes." His voice was calm. "If you walk out now, I lose everything." Emily turned to him. "Then let it go." He stepped forward. "But if you stay, I might lose you." She froze. For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, finally, "You already did." She walked past him without looking back. Out of the estate, out of the marriage, out of the life that had nearly swallowed her. It wasn't a triumphant exit. It was quiet, but it was hers. And that, more than anything, was enough. The Duvall estate felt emptier after Emily's departure, but not in the way Nicholas had expected. He had grown accustomed to her presence in the halls. Her voice carried faintly through the music room, the soft thud of her steps along the marble corridors. Her silence now was a presence all its own, one that echoed with the choices he had made and the things he had not said when they mattered most. Nicholas had spent years constructing his life with precision, each decision calibrated for control, efficiency, power. He hadn't realized until now how much of it had been built on rot, on silence and shadows, on things Alan had taught him to bury instead of confront. For the first time in his life, he no longer wanted to win. He wanted to undo. The board responded swiftly to his confession. Within 72 hours, Alan was removed from his executive post by unanimous vote. The restitution process began immediately, with lawyers finalizing the release of Carter Holdings' assets to Emily as legal heir. The media reaction was less volatile than anticipated, helped in part by Nicholas's quiet approach to the announcement and his public statement taking full responsibility. But none of that brought peace. He moved out of the estate temporarily and into a modest apartment near the financial district, the kind with bare walls and simple furniture. There was no staff, no marble floors, no curated meals, just space and silence. And that was exactly what he needed. In the weeks that followed, he declined interviews, avoided public appearances, and focused on one thing: rebuilding. Not just the company, which had suffered public bruising but remained intact, but himself. He started attending internal meetings alone. No entourage. He personally reviewed charity cases filed under the Duval name, ones previously buried beneath corporate red tape. He reopened the Duval Fellowship for Young Inventors, reinstated grants that had been quietly cut during Allen's reign, and began funding projects under a new name, Carter Duval Foundation. His team advised against it. The branding, they argued, was too raw, too connected to scandal. Nicholas refused to listen. Then, one rainy afternoon nearly a month after Emily had left, he received a call from Walter, the family's legal advisor. "She's seen the transfer," Walter said, "and she's aware of what you've done since." Nicholas was silent on the line. Walter hesitated. "She didn't contest the annulment. It's been processed. Legally, you're no longer married." "I know. There's something else." She declined the full financial settlement, only accepted what was tied directly to her father's patents. She left everything else untouched. Nicholas felt the air shift in his lungs. Of course she had. "She's living in Asheville now," Walter added, volunteering at a nonprofit, teaching art part-time. Nicholas didn't ask how Walter knew. He only said, "Thank you." That night, Nicholas stood in front of the mirror in his apartment, tie half knotted, hesitation sitting heavier than anything else he'd carried in months. He didn't send a driver. He didn't bring security. He took the train. Asheville was colder than he remembered, more real. He found the nonprofit by asking a volunteer near the town square. The building was modest, the kind with peeling paint and kids' artwork taped to the windows. Inside, the sound of laughter and markers on paper filled the air. He waited until her class ended. Emily stepped into the hallway, still wearing the paint-streaked apron, hair pulled up, tired but relaxed in a way he had never seen before. When she saw him, she froze. He didn't speak. Not yet. Finally, she crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you. Without a suit, without a driver, without expectations." She looked at him for a long moment. And to say that I'm sorry. Not just for what happened to your father, but for what I let happen to you. She didn't move. "You can't undo it." "I know, but I can show you who I've become because of it." Emily leaned against the wall. "So this is who you are now? The man who apologizes." "No," he said softly. "I'm still learning how. But I started with Alan, and I haven't stopped since." "You dismantled your father's empire," she said. "Why?" "Because I didn't want to be the man he built. I wanted to be someone I could stand beside." There was a pause. Then, her voice lower now. "What do you want from me?" He took a step forward, not touching her, but closing the space between them. "I don't want to negotiate. I don't want to convince. I just want to know if there's a chance you'll let me show you who I am now." Emily studied him. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're still thinking in terms of contracts, or if this time it's just about choice." Nicholas nodded. "Only choice. Always from now on. She looked down, then back at him. I don't know if I can trust you. I'm willing to wait until you can. And if I never do, I'll still be glad I came. Emily stepped past him, heading toward the front door. He followed quietly. Outside, the sky was darkening, and the rain had begun again, light, steady. She paused under the awning, turned to him. You didn't bring an umbrella. I didn't think that far ahead. She handed him hers, simple and floral with a broken spoke. He smiled. Thank you. She didn't smile back, but something in her eyes softened. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I can offer. It's more than I hoped for. Then she turned and walked back inside. Nicholas stood there for a long time, the umbrella in hand, rain tapping gently against the fabric. He had lost the deal. He had lost the marriage. But for the first time, he felt like he had found the man he was supposed to be, and that was the turning point. Weeks passed before Emily saw Nicholas again. True to his word, he didn't force contact. No phone calls, no letters, no unannounced appearances at her new apartment or the nonprofit, where she continued to volunteer. It was as though he had placed her story into her hands and waited in silence for her to decide whether it deserved another chapter. She spent her days in relative calm. The quiet of Asheville, the simplicity of her routines, and the absence of curated wealth gave her something she hadn't realized she missed: stillness. The children at the art center brought laughter into her world again, and every time she guided a small hand holding a paintbrush, she felt a flicker of healing in herself. But even as her life rebuilt itself brick by brick, Nicholas remained at the edge of her mind. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't longing. It was something harder to find, an unfinished line in a drawing, a shape that refused to be erased. One Sunday morning, while helping a young girl wash out brushes stained with violet paint, Emily's phone buzzed. The message was brief. The foundation is launching today. Carter Duval. There's a seat for you on the board if you want it. No pressure. Just an invitation. She didn't respond. That afternoon, she walked to the community library and found an article in the local paper about the new foundation's mission. The headline was simple: Restitution Turned Legacy. Nicholas Duval launches public fund to empower innovators. Honors late Richard Carter. There was a photograph. Nicholas stood outside the building that now bore both family names. No fanfare. No press conference. Just an honest beginning. Emily folded the paper and returned home. The next morning, she stood outside the new foundation's entrance. The building wasn't flashy. It had been a converted warehouse with exposed beams and glass offices, a space filled with open air and intention. She walked in slowly, unsure what she would say or what she hoped to find. The receptionist looked up and smiled. Miss Carter? Yes. I'm not sure if I'm expected. You are. He's upstairs. Nicholas was standing at the top of the mezzanine, arms crossed as he watched through the window overlooking a small courtyard where several interns worked with engineers and volunteers. He turned when he heard her footsteps. I didn't think you'd come, he said. I didn't think I would either. He nodded once, then gestured toward a chair. I meant what I said. There's a place for you here, but it's not an obligation. You owe me nothing. I know. I just wanted the truth of what your father built to have a life, not because it benefits me, but because it should have never been buried in the first place. She looked at him. And what about us? He hesitated. That's not something I ever want to reduce to an offer. Not again. Emily sat down, resting her hands on the table between them. When we met, I thought you were just cold. I thought all you cared about was control. But now I wonder if all that coldness was just protection. He looked away. It was, and now, I'm learning how to be someone without armor. She nodded slowly. I've been learning that too. A long silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a kind of pause that came when two people stopped performing and started speaking with the weight of what they had lived through. I don't want to be your redemption arc, Nicholas, Emily said, and I'm not here to be rescued. I know. I'm not asking you to save me. Just stay, if you want to. Stay because we could build something together. Something not built on guilt or need or sacrifice, And if I walk away again, I won't stop you, but I'll hope you come back. Emily leaned back. This time, I need to choose freely. You are. They sat like that for a while. No vows, no contracts, no whisper strategy. Just two people in the aftermath of a storm, reaching towards something fragile and honest. Later that week, she accepted the board seat, but she didn't move back into the estate. Instead, Nicholas began visiting Asheville once a week. No meetings, no business talk. They would sit at the cafe near the nonprofit or walk through the local bookstore, sometimes talking, sometimes just being near each other in the quiet comfort of shared space. One evening, they sat under a canopy of string lights outside a corner bistro. Emily sipped her tea, then glanced at him. You used to think everything had to have a function, she said. Even relationships. He smiled faintly. I did. And now, I think some things are meant to be chosen again and again, not for what they give us, but for how they change us. She looked at him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, then asked me again. He leaned forward. Will you stay? This time, she didn't pause. Yes. And just like that, the line that once began as a transaction was rewritten. No longer signed by lawyers, no longer bound by circumstance. Only choice, only trust, only the quiet, powerful decision to begin again. 1 year later, Emily walked into the sun-drenched atrium of the Carter Duvall Foundation, not as a guest, not as a name on a plaque, but as its co-director. The building was alive with a quiet hum of work, volunteers checking equipment, students sketching designs, partners reviewing grants. It was everything her father had dreamed of but never lived to see. And now it was hers. Not inherited, not gifted, chosen. She wore no title she hadn't earned. No one whispered about scandals or questioned her presence. The press had moved on. The story had become something else entirely. A tale of reform, redemption, and responsibility. Nicholas arrived just after noon, as he did most days. He was no longer the man who paced marble floors with his jaw locked and his conscience buried. The sharp edges of his demeanor hadn't dulled, but they had shifted, replaced by something steadier, quieter. He still wore suits, but they were less precise. His smile, rare but real, didn't look rehearsed anymore. When he walked into her office, Emily didn't look up immediately. She was sketching a draft for an upcoming youth exhibition. He leaned against the doorway and waited the way he had learned to, not intruding, not assuming, just there. You missed the grant review meeting, she said without lifting her eyes. I was helping install the solar panels on the west side. She looked up, surprised. You? Manual labor? Some of us find redemption in small things. She smirked. Next you'll be sweeping the halls. I already did. Last night. I'm trying to earn my keep. She stood, brushing her hands on her skirt. Well, in that case, you're promoted. We need someone to lead the community engagement panel next week. He tilted his head. You sure I'm ready? No, but I trust you. His smile was brief but full. That means more than I can say. They walked together through the foundation's garden, where new fruit trees had taken root. Nicholas gestured toward the row of plaques lining the pathway. Names of contributors and families who had made the foundation possible. We should add your father's name, he said, to the East Wing. Emily nodded. And yours, not as Duvall, just Nicholas. Do you think that name means anything anymore? It means what you've made it mean. They stopped near the bench beneath the pergola where students often ate lunch or sketched quietly. Nicholas sat first. Emily followed, pulling her knees up slightly, comfortable in the kind of silence they had once found impossible. She turned to him. I used to think love came after everything was perfect. After the pain was gone, the past settled. But now I know better. How so? It comes in pieces, one choice at a time. Some days it looks like forgiveness. Some days it's just staying. Nicholas reached into his pocket and took out a small box. No velvet, no gold, just simple wood, crafted by a local artisan. He placed it in her hand without speaking. Emily opened it slowly. Inside was a ring, not extravagant, not strategic, not for the cameras, just one made of silver and walnut. Engraved inside with a single word, again. She looked at him. What is this? It's not a proposal. Not in the way we did it before. She held the ring between her fingers. He continued, voice quieter now. This is me asking, not as a transaction, but as a man who finally understands what love is. Asking if you'll keep choosing me. Not because you need to, but because you want to. Emily looked at the ring, then at him. This time, she said, we write the terms. No boardroom, no clauses, no press, no end date, only if we choose one. He nodded once, then say yes. She slid the ring onto her finger. I just did. That night, they walked home together through the quiet streets of Asheville. No paparazzi followed. No contracts waited on the kitchen table. Just two people who had once stood on opposite sides of a debt and found, somehow, a way to build a life beyond it. Emily's mother, now fully recovered, sent postcards from her volunteer trip in South America. Noah had just started college with a scholarship from the Carter Duvall Foundation. And Nicholas? He laughed more now, spoke slower. Sometimes, he even forgot to check his phone. They shared dinners with no agenda, fought, forgave, made coffee at midnight just because. There were days when the past whispered, but they always answered it with the same quiet truth. They had not escaped their story. They had rewritten it. Months later, during a small interview for a human interest piece in a regional magazine, a young journalist asked Emily, do you regret it? Any of it? Emily looked out the window. Her fingers curled loosely around a mug of tea. Not a single thing, she said. Because love, when it is built not from rescue or desperation, but from choice, becomes something stronger than history, something entirely their own.